first night I had a vision. For 4 hours, I had a conversation with a snake in a vision.
You saw her?
I saw a mother ayahuasca, yo.
All right, it's been a while since I had this dude on. I figured I just wouldn't bother him in retirement. You know, he's writing books and shit. He's doing all types of stuff, as he always is. But we got him. He's on his book tour, and I got my copy the other day, and I haven't read a book in a while, but this could be the one. This could be the one. When my friends write books, I generally read them. I'm excited. He's a brilliant cat. He was a great player and one of my favorite teammates, Malcolm Jenkins. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me. You definitely got to read the book because you're in it, my friend.
That's what I hear. So spoil it for me. Is it good or bad? What happened?
You got to go read to see it.
Okay,
bro. You got to go check it out.
And you're gonna be, every time you see me, you're gonna be like, "Yo, what happened in that part?" And I'm gonna.
I'm gonna be seeing if you're mad at me or not. Like, you know.
Okay.
Remember that time you got me on the sideline? Yeah. I got some get back.
Okay, good. All right, good. Well, I haven't heard about it yet, so I'm gonna get in the book. I got a nice little drive later today, dude. When did you decide to write a book? Did you know you're going to write a book when we were playing, or something in the back of your head?
You know, I didn't know. It was around 2021 is when I started the book.
Yeah.
Like that training camp, I'm just sitting around and I'm like, I could kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, I don't know if I can make it through another training camp.
I remember.
And those thoughts just started to like make me reflect on the whole 13 years of my career. Then it went further to Ohio State and just all the things that have kind of brought me to where I am today. And I'm like, I know I have to tell my own story. You know how it is as an athlete. Most people tell your story for you. But most people don't get the purview of all of the things that go into making you who you are. And so I started that process, which was cool, but I was still playing. So I thought I needed a ghostwriter. And that just didn't work. We worked on that for about maybe a year and a half and just couldn't get my voice.
Yeah.
And about 30 days before the book was supposed to even, go out, I had to make a decision. Either the book was going to get canceled or I needed to write it myself. And so, me being me, I'm like, I'll do it myself. I kind of went into like a training camp mode, but really just got a chance to really distill down all of the things that I've learned and like weave it into a narrative that's not just a linear story like, hey, I went here, I did this, and I won. It's like, hey, we're going back and forth through time. So it's the past, it's the present. You'll get to see kind of like all of these characters in my life who've made me who I am, the people, the challenges I've had, the failures I've had, all weaved into this like kind of collection of short stories that ultimately, leads into showing who I am. Everyone's seen the Super Bowls. We've seen these highly publicized moments, but what they haven't seen is kind of the behind the scenes, the difficulties in marriage and family and finances and business and trying to organize, a social justice movement, all while being in the public eye. I go through it all, and it's extremely vulnerable. You know how I am. I'm a poised guy. I got a poker face on at all times. But this is really me kind of opening that curtain.
Well, that was it for me. When I heard you writing a book, I was like, Malcolm won't say 2 words some days, but he's got a book that's probably 10,000 words long, and you've just been saving it up. So I think I think you're the perfect guy to do one, because even with all the hats you wore and all the things you were involved with, you had an economy of words about you. You definitely like to leave something to the imagination. And, I don't know if you just have always had that kind of quieter, more strong, silent personality. And I think it's also the reason that you might intimidate some guys. Like, did you ever get the sense that there were some of the younger players that were intimidated by you? Like, you never intimidated me because we're the same age, and fuck, I'm just going to bother you until you start fucking playing back. And eventually we became really tight. But it was like, if you walk in that building, you're like an alpha. And, I think part of your mystique is you don't say much. And, I kind of wonder if you ever were aware of that.
Yeah, it's a lot of it is, a lot of people don't understand I'm super introverted.
Yeah.
So the majority of the time I'm like, you'll see me with my hood up, like just walking through the hall, like you said, and I'm like deep in thought most of the time. But I remember Sproles when me and Sproles first got there. He came up to me one day in training camp, like, man, yo, what'd you do to these people? I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, man, everybody. He's like, he's talking about how Howie came up to him and asked him to just like, hey, see if I enjoyed it here, if I was having fun, if I have regretted my decision. He's like, because he never smiles,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, man, I'm just focused. It had nothing to do with anybody else. But I did notice that, like people walk on eggshells a little bit because they don't know. Because I'm silent, I don't get my words. They're like, but I'm most of the time just thinking.
Yeah. No, I know. That's the way I read you. And some of the younger guys who maybe are in your meeting room, they're probably a little frightened of you when they walk in. They're like, "Man, there's this 10-year vet. You're like one of the old NFL holdovers."
Right.
Like the vets are. That's the thing. The vets are way different than they were when we came in the league. And so I think
Yeah.
leadership is an interesting topic that I'm sure you touch on in the book. Again, is what winners won't tell you. Lessons from a legendary defender. Like leadership, does it come up in the book? And what's your whole leadership ground floor kind of? I mean, people have all types of different ideas of what leadership is. What is it to you, and how
Yep.
did you go about that, and how did that evolve as your career went on?
Yeah, I even talk about it in the book that like and one of the things I'm most proud of is like I feel like every teammate that I have, while that might be like the initial kind of read,
Yeah,
is like every young player that has played in my room knows I spill every bit of knowledge that I have about the game.
yeah,
Like by all means, come meet me,
yeah,
watch tape. Like I'll give you every tip. But it really, we talk about that in the book, why that's important to me from a leadership standpoint. It's always been like the motto of a servant leader.
yeah,
Like how do I, not only just lead because some people get appointed to leadership, whether they're qualified or not. Some people get appointed to leadership because they're the most talented in the room, but maybe not the best leader. And so I've got a chance to follow a lot of good leaders like John Vilma, the Drew Breeses, and really watch them. And so you'll see in the story this evolution of like a follower, but like a leader as well, of that same thing where I sit back and analyze the situation and how I strategically like decide to use my voice in certain spots. But I think I've always tried to be a servant leader, and I think I talk about it in the book. Toward the end, football has started to die for me. I was losing the fun in it because I was just so focused on, the producing, the what my role was,
yeah,
all of these other things. And then it got down to like, no, I have the most fun when I'm worried about my teammates.
yeah.
Like, let me just focus on these guys. I'm gonna make them the best players I can be. And then all of a sudden I started enjoying the game a little bit more because it wasn't about anything but your teammates, the locker room, your day to day grind to go like perform. And I found that to be the most. I've been had to step up and be a leader in so many different ways. I thought that was one that was actually most challenging and but also the most rewarding is when you're leading from like the back seat.
Yeah.
You're pushing guys to the forefront, but at the same time, your role is to prepare them and keep them, at their best. That stuff is like I think what I'm doing now, just trying to apply that to my family, trying to apply that to my businesses, where these things can go on without me, but my role is really to influence the people who are going to go do the work.
Yeah, and that's something we've touched on this podcast before, and I've talked about it at length. Is being a guy who you might consider a leader. Myself, when I played, and leadership takes different forms. In my prime, it was easy to lead because you're like the head honcho. And then later in my career, when I get there, I kind of got to read the room and be like, okay, Malk's a leader. A couple guys are leaders. How do I fit into this? And it's harder as you get older because you're not who you were. And, for me,
Right.
especially then in my career, I was still a good player, but it was hard for me sometimes to be like, all right, I'm going to fully embrace this leadership role because you're not one of the guys who are top 5 playmakers on the team. And so you got to be cognizant
Right.
of that and that sort of thing. And then when you get to retirement, leadership takes a totally different role because
Mhm.
I really believe this. We overstate, I think, when football players, and make no mistake about it, I think we bring something different to the table when it comes to corporate America, running a business, the whole thing. We're team players. We've been in high stress situations, the whole thing. But we have to adjust our leadership style. And,
Yeah.
because that was one of the biggest hangups for me when I started this job and trying to run a company and be a leader is like I was still leading like I was a football player, which
Yeah,
is
it doesn't.
jarring to some people,
It is.
you know?
It is. I think it's the level of, quality of work that we've had to do. Like we've all been in an environment where it's not just us, but everybody is like, if I'm not the best at what I'm doing, then what am I doing
Yeah.
here? You realize that that's just not how the rest of the world works. There are some people like that. And so I've had to like use a lot of those same like things. I'm like, all right, I've not every teammate has been hyper motivated. Like, what did I do when I had a lazy teammate, or if I needed to change? Like I changed teams and got to when I first got to Philly
Yeah.
and realized like the room is a little dysfunctional. But like you said, I can't come in here and say all of y'all are losers
Yeah.
and
That's not going
and
to
then
work.
follow me. Yeah, it's like, oh no, I got to silently just lead by action and
Yeah.
then let my work ethic just make you look lazy.
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
then you
then
got
you
to
gotta
figure it out
like
on your own. But it's
you
also the
gotta figure it out on your own.
communication, bro. Like I've told this story before, but last year, like I had like come to Jesus talk or 2 years ago with my crew here. It's like me, 4 or 5 guys, and we're trying to like improve the efficiency of the pod and like, we're trying to do better work and that sort of thing. And I had a little pep talk with him, and we talked about it on the pod the next week. And I asked one of the producers, I was like, "How'd you feel about that conversation?" He's like, "Well, I got something to say about that. You said something that I wanted to bring up." And I said, "What did I say?" He said, "You called us motherfuckers." And I said, "Give me the context in which I called you motherfuckers, because I don't remember it." And he said, "Well, you called us some hardworking motherfuckers." And I said, "That's a fucking compliment where I come
That's a
from."
compliment.
So it's just, like taking the edge off of your leadership, lowering the
Yeah,
standards sometimes, not for yourself, but for the people around you, and going in that more like, and also like the perfectionism of being a pro football player, the feeling like you have a gun to your head and like having to go out and get your job done. Like it's just not the same temperature, and it's
yeah,
okay, And so part of it is you just saying, I got to learn to relax a little bit.
yeah.
And I think that's retirement in a nutshell. Is like,
This,
I
I'm like, this is therapy for me
yeah,
because,
dude. 'Cause
I'm like fresh in it. I'm literally having these conversations
you,
like at the moment where I'm like, is it me? I'm like, I'm wilding. But
yeah, no,
I
it's
remember Corey Underland telling us like, yo, there's nothing casual about what we do.
nothing.
Like nothing was casual about football. Everything's urgent. There's no walking on the field. There's no taking your time. It's like every day you're being evaluated. Where, out here it's just a little different. Like you said, everybody's not marching to that beat, but you also realize that that's what makes us cut, from a different cloth. Like
Right.
we've been through that process, that environment, and we actually thrive in that environment.
Yeah.
And then we get tossed into, other things, and it's like playing with younger players when you're at the peak of your knowledge of the game, you're trying to do like the things that you can imagine doing in the middle of the game, and a young player is like, nah, man, this is outside the playbook.
Yeah,
I can't
dude.
even.
What am I? Yeah. Yeah. No,
Yeah,
it's the communication is standard. It's the whole deal. And then retirement, I think also, and I'd love for you to talk about the struggles of retirement because I think we all struggle with it. I mean, like even if in retirement over the last 4 years, I've looked like I've been swimming, I'm like a duck on the surface, and
yeah,
like I'm paddling as hard as I can, and it might look like I got it
you got
together,
it
but I've
together,
had trouble.
right?
I've definitely had trouble. I think for me, some of it is the reconciling with your career. Even if you had a great career and you're happy, there's only one way to look. There's only one way to look now, and it's back. And like
Backwards.
during your
Yep.
career, you could always say, "Hey, next year I'm gonna do this thing. Next year I'm gonna achieve this goal. I'm gonna improve on this thing." And you look up 8, 9 years in your career and realize it's not gonna go forever. And at
Right.
some point, you can't say that anymore. But until it hits, you don't really feel it. And I also think the ego part of it, which everybody has an ego, it's one of the most misused
Yeah.
words. Okay, like everyone has an ego. You have to have an ego to survive. And in the NFL, you have to have a big ego. And I don't mean like you're arrogant,
Yeah.
but you have to be your biggest advocate. You have to think you're better than you are. You got to walk in confident. You got to walk in like not taking any shit from anybody. And then you get to retirement and that thing kind of changes. And I wonder for you if being away from football, you learned anything about yourself that you maybe talked about in the book or the struggles of
Yeah.
just being a regular guy and dealing with regular guy shit.
No, I think I talk about it a lot in the book. The book starts off with me with retirement.
Yeah.
So it's not like, hey, I'm gonna take you through my life, but it's like we know how this ends. Like
Yeah.
I make all these. This is my career. I win 2 Super Bowls. Cool. This is really not about that. And at the end of the book, you see me getting ready now to step into whatever that unknown
Yeah.
is, and I talk about it like there's fear because you know you want that stage forever. You want to be able to
Yeah.
be acknowledged as one of the best in the world at what you do, and then starting over at zero,
Yeah.
is scary in a world where you've been drilled in your brain to believe that you're a dumb jock, that somehow we are dependent on the people who handle all these services for us. All we know is football.
Yeah.
And it's really just like an unconditioning, like that has to kind of go through in you got to challenge that fear. That's, at least that's where I am now, because I feel those doubts like daily. But one of the things that's helped me is like, how do I structure my life in this football that I know? Like, so my week, like when I work out, how I attack, different tasks, I'll just make that the game. So I
Yeah.
know, okay, if this parent teacher conference meeting is the game this week, then what do I need to do to prepare for that? All
Yeah.
right, I need to know what my kids doing in school. I need to know, and I just take that approach to everything, and it at least like keeps me focused, because I think the structure to me is the biggest thing that you lose, is the ability to work toward what you're doing. So when I first hit the ground, I'm like, okay, now what do I do? And you see athletes do it all the time. We're trying to do everything.
Too much, dude. I try to do too
Yeah,
much
we're trying to do
because
too
you're
much
afraid of that
because
idle
we can.
time.
Yeah,
Your
right.
work capacity is huge because
Yeah,
you've done it. You're a grinder, and then you're also you think you have the confidence that you can tackle everything, and
yeah,
before you know it, you're doing too much. And for me, it was like a mental health thing. It was like, fuck, I got to take a break or I'm gonna lose my mind after football. And it's not because of the reason I thought. I thought I was gonna lose my mind because I'd be sitting still. But I feel,
right.
and also you talk
I feel
about,
more busy now,
yeah, and you
which
and
is
you
crazy.
you talk
Yeah.
you talk about like liking it to football. I had a sudden change last week. Waylon pulled the fucking fire alarm at school, Mal. So, you get all types of unexpected things that
Yeah,
you just
I got
never.
a whole chapter called "Sudden
Do you
Change" just
really?
for that reason right
That's
there.
perfect. Were there things in this
Yeah.
book that you almost didn't write about, and you were really hard for you to share?
Yeah, so chapter 11, I named it 111th. And
Mhm.
it's this idea of like your role and your like identity, so what's your role, on a team? Not, we know as football players, like our roles aren't created equal,
Yeah,
but all of them are equally as important. So it's like, what does that mean now as a
yeah,
man, for your family, for your community, your team, your job? And I talk about the Super Bowl year. A lot of people see that as a year that was like the best year ever. But for me, it was one of the most challenging
I
years ever.
know.
It's like, yes, there was a Super Bowl team, but it was me leading that. It was me leading the negotiations along with Anquan Bolden and with the NFL for the social justice movement. Then there was also I talk about my marriage failing at that time
Yeah,
and having to like put on a strong face so nobody knew about these things. Like the mourning I kind of had to do with the idea of what my family looked like, and then having to, like you said, deal with sudden change
yeah,
and reinvent that, dealing with family struggles, like financially, wanting to be there for them, but also recognizing like I can't, if I'm going to make this work, I have to protect, the assets, the
yeah.
money. And so it's all of these strains that are like at that year was all pulling at the same time. And that's probably the shortest chapter in the book. It was the hardest to write because in the entire book, I try to bring you like into the moment, into my helmet, those moments like you said where I'm quiet and reserved for words. It's like, oh, there's plenty of dialogue in those moments,
Hmm.
and so bringing people into that space was difficult because I had to relive it a few different times. I even talk about my struggles with mental health and contemplating suicide around that same year. And so it's to your point, even like afterwards, you realize that like we are the strong friends, that like when people see us, we work hard and we'll go at it. So it'll look like we're doing well, even if we're barely treading water. And so that was kind of one of the other things that I wanted to talk about is there is this idea that we have of winners and how easy they make this stuff look, but it is not at all easy to carry all of
Well,
that.
it's just like, I'm a gambler, right? Hard right turn into
Mhm.
gambling for a quarter second. It's really, as you know, um, if you bet college football, especially, it's 80 guys in the locker room. They're kids. They have a bunch of shit going on. You don't know where anybody's head's going to be at a given week. And again, it's that whole, like, on the surface, I see two football teams, but I don't know if the quarterback's dealing with something from his personal life. I don't know if, somebody has a sick parent, or, you like Super Bowl year, and there's a lot to unpack there, but like you're dealing with a marriage that's in peril. You're dealing with your social justice stuff, which I thought, you held your head high and worked as hard as you possibly could, but you took a lot of arrows, man. And, you know, there's that, there's just your mental health, the whole thing. Like, what was the lowest point for you? I didn't know. I'm one of your boys. I had no idea that you were that
Yeah,
low. So next time, tell me first off, motherfucker. But secondly, secondly,
yeah,
like, how'd you get there, and how low was it? Because when you put that
yeah,
in a book, I gotta ask.
yeah. I think it's one of those things where you just over time you pile things up, right? It's like being on a bench. You're like, all right, you put a couple plates on, you got that easy. Put a couple more plates on, and a lot of the times we have friendships where our friends, when you're the strong guy, they just sit back and watch you do the stuff.
Right.
Right? They're not spotting you; they're just in awe of all of the things you're able to carry, and you just keep putting plates on because like any man, we want to challenge ourselves, we want to stretch the limits, but at some point in time you're going to reach that bandwidth. And I think that was the year for me that I did. And I'm trying to do everything in my power to hold that in because I don't want to be a distraction. I don't want to. It's like if you start talking about it, it becomes real. And so I try to just compartmentalize it until it just I couldn't anymore. And then I talk about one of the things that was probably the most humbling parts, but it was also, I saw it as weak, but really was probably the strongest thing to do was actually ask for help. Um, and then once I did that, that started like therapy. So I've been in therapy for 6 years now, 6, 7 years
Yeah, me
now,
too. About the
which
same.
is which is yeah, yeah, which has been good. Like it just you get those outlets and those tools. So I'll talk about that it doesn't mean that life gets easier. It just means that like as you build up all of these things with life, you go on, you add your business, you add your family, you add your own dreams and personal goals. That's a lot to maintain. You got to build up some tools and some things to get you, to navigate these great things. And so it's like whether that's meditation, it's breathing, it's all kind of things, like a bunch of that self-care conversation, knowing that you got to we talk about it all in football, right?
Yeah.
The best thing you can be is available.
Yeah.
I realized like if I didn't take care of my mental, I didn't do the things that I needed to do to take care of myself, then eventually I wouldn't be worth anything for my family, wouldn't be worth anything for the
Yeah.
community, the team, all of the things I'm trying to hold up.
Yeah, man. It's so interesting because I'm sitting here and I'm like, talk to me, man. But the times that I've been the lowest, and some of them have been recent, I don't seek people out. Like, I go to therapy, but my standing in my social circle is I'm the person people are depending on. And like, whether it's being
Mm-hmm.
the boss here, or like, I'm having a real bad day, and I'm not talking about a bad day like you're just in a bad mood. I'm talking about you're bad. It's bad.
Yeah.
And I'm afraid to go to my wife because she's dealing with three kids. You don't want to be the fourth kid, and like,
Right.
how am I going to complain about my life when your setup's even harder? And at work, again, you're the leader, and your friends. You don't want to come across weak, and sometimes you also don't assume that they'll understand. And so,
Right.
like, no matter who's on the menu to talk to, you find a reason not to. And just two
Right.
weeks ago, I I've been working my tail off, man. Like, and the schedule's crazy and all that stuff. And it's a football season. It is what it is. But I went out.
Right.
I went to a concert. And you know me. I like music, and went out and went with my buddies from high school and had a great. Well, was supposed to have a great time. And I found myself sitting at that concert, like, I just want to escape. Like, I just like I felt like
Yeah.
the things I've always loved to do, I'm having a hard time doing them. And I was ready to explode, and I talked to one of my good friends later that night, and all it took was me saying like, I'm having a bad night, man. And the conversation that followed that, I think, got me through the last 2 weeks. And
Yeah.
it's just a simple like, I'm not having a good time, and your
Yep.
friends will usually follow that lead, but it's terrifying to say that, and not because I'm not outward with my emotions. You know me, I wear my emotions on my sleeve, but I guess there is something about showing that weakness, or putting that burden on other people is more the problem, I think, for me. So I'm with you, man.
It's one of those things that, like, for me, that was scary, right? But it's a muscle that we don't
Yeah.
use. It's a part of our growth. I think we rob ourselves sometimes of our ability to love any differently because we aren't vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so, like, we talk about, all right, what's the different like ways for leadership? Is like, in order to find those, you've even got to be open enough to be weak, to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and all of that stuff. So I think it's once I started doing it, it definitely made it a lot easier. You get a friend or two that you can call on in a bind. But I do think there's also times like I'm still here,
Yeah,
right? Like, there are
exactly.
things I've learned having to weather that stuff myself. There are tools that I got through where I can stop catastrophizing, right? Like, okay, let me not make this a bigger deal than it is,
Yeah.
and use these tools to get through it, because you're not always gonna have somebody. But it does, it's like, again, when you're really trying to stretch yourself, you're taking on something that's bigger than what you can do. You're gonna need, a support group, somebody there to spot you. Even if you don't ever drop the bar or drop the weight, you might make it to the finish line without help. It's still good to have that support system there. So that's part of what I hope people get, man. Like you said to me, bro, please reach out, because we
Yeah.
all are struggling a little bit. And we're the only people who really understand this lifestyle, what it's like to play football, have your identity in something since you were probably 6, 7 years old, and then rip the band-aid off. And now, like you said, the only thing you can do is look back. So one of the things I found myself doing is like, well, okay, I tried to reject looking back.
Yeah.
I wanted to look forward
Yeah.
now. I almost tried to, like, I wanted to erase the mental conditioning
Yeah.
of football when I first retired. So I stopped really watching it. I'm traveling. I'm into art. Did a nice little
I'm
ayahuasca
fucking that
retreat.
up. Oh, yes. This is good
Yeah.
because we were like, you texted me yesterday and you were like, are we going to talk about ayahuasca tomorrow? And I was like, well, it wasn't on the menu, but all you got say, yeah. So you did this.
Yeah. So it happened. I was trying to do it last December, and it just so happened that the trip gets delayed till May. And so it was right after I turned in the final pages of this book. So it really was therapeutic for me. Like, I got to unpack that whole, football experience, write it, put it to the side. And then I was really trying to, I was hoping that the medicine was going to, like, untrain me, all the mental conditioning I've had through football, and let me really, like, see what is my purpose that is bigger than just, ball. And it was an experience. I hadn't had much experience with psychedelics before then.
Yeah.
So you go, it was in Peru, right? You go right on the Amazon jungle, right in the Amazon jungle, right on the outskirts. So you're off the grid. There's no cell service, no internet. You're there for 5 days. 3 of the days you go through the ayahuasca ceremony. The first 2 days, I don't feel anything. Give you the medicine. Everybody else is having, I can see the dude next to me. He's like sleep in the fetal position, smiling and laughing. He's having like the trip of his life. And I'm sitting there, my back hurts. I've been sitting for 4 hours, with my legs crossed, waiting for something to happen. And nothing happened the first 2 days, except it kept telling me that I needed to, like, forgive a bunch of people. So I was kind of like working through these blocks of forgiveness. And then I'm like, show me, I wanted to show me my fears. I want to transform
Yeah.
from this. And the last night they gave me a triple dose, like, to the point where the shaman, even when they were about to give it to me, she's like, are you sure? And they're like, yes. So I'm like, all right, we're gonna go there. And for 4 hours, the first night I had a vision, for 4 hours, I had a conversation with a snake in a
You
vision. It's not a
saw
real
you
snake.
saw her?
I saw a mother ayahuasca, yo.
No, and I believe
And
you. That's the thing. Like,
yeah,
it's like ghost stories. I'll read
yeah.
people on YouTube or watch people talking about their experiences, but I'm like, I don't know this motherfucker. He could just be making something up. But you saw
the snake, the mother ayahuasca, that's supposed to represent the spirit of the medicine. And we talked for 4 hours about everything, bro. And it was like mind blowing, but really changed my mind on like, what I'm supposed to be doing. This idea of like, I want to love the world. I found myself like really contemplating love a lot. And it talked about just shifting my idea of love from a feeling to an action. And so, even start with myself. Most of us, like for me, it's like, all right, how do I know that I love myself? Well, if I look in the mirror, if I dress good, I feel good. I'm like, all right, I feel good. I love myself. And so when I go out into the world, I'll do stuff that makes me feel good. And I'm like, I love that person, or I love my partner because I have these feelings. Doesn't mean I'm loyal. Doesn't mean I'm doing anything with action. I feel the
Yeah,
love.
that's the bare minimum.
Um, yeah. And so it's like, all right, now turn that into an action. Like, what do you do to love yourself? And it's like, okay, well, to love myself, I gotta have some like discipline. There's things I can't do if I love myself, right? There's things that if I want to be healthy, then I need to work out, not just because I want to look good, but because I love myself,
Yeah.
right? Then it's like, okay, now all of a sudden you start to look at your partner the other way. It's not just a feeling. It's like, what am I doing in my daily actions to show that I love you? That's going to teach me lessons of how to love my kid. It's going to teach me lessons of how to love my community. And so it's like this starting with yourself and then letting that radiate out was really a lot of what I got. And then at the very end, I have a conversation. I see my ancestors. So I talk about them in the book a lot, how I would have conversations with my two grandfathers and my grandmother right during the national anthem, right before kickoff. That became like my routine. And so during this ayahuasca trip the last night, um, I'm sitting and I turn into a childlike version of myself, and my grandparents are singing to me and they're reminding me of like who I am as a leader. They're showing me like, that these things that have happened in my life aren't just by happenstance, how they've been guiding the way and setting these things up. I just have to remember like that I don't bow to anybody, that I am, somebody who's meant to lead. And then they're like, just basically letting me know that they're there at all
That's
times.
wild.
And that jump was, it was a lot, but it really did help me kind of showcase like it's not for me to take my experiences with the league and throw all of it away. It's actually like, no, this process that I'm going through, that we've been through, it was all on purpose, and that is a stepping stone now to something else.
Yeah, the
Like
road's
focus
not
on it.
over. The road continues, man.
Yeah,
No, so what?
yeah, it
So
was a
what
lot.
did the snake look like? I got a few follow up questions here,
It looked like a normal snake.
but just like six
It
feet
was.
tall.
Oh yeah, I was sitting, so the whole time it kept telling me to meditate too. That was the other thing. I needed to
Close your
meditate
eyes. Don't
every
worry about me. I'll just be here.
day. Oh yeah, I was like, yo, how do I trust you, man? What's up? But nah, it was really like one of those things that was, you know, it's hard to explain because I wasn't even out of control. I can open like one time it just got too much and I just asked it like, can I take a break? And it's like, sure. And then the vision pauses and I'm just sitting in the room like aware of everything that's going on. And then, all right, when I'm ready, all right, let's go. And it just takes you back off. I'm like, it was something
See,
I couldn't even expect.
I like the shrooms and
Hmm.
so I have messed with psychedelics, plenty, but I've never done this, and the understanding I had was like it's gonna change you, and then some people though they get changed for the worse, and then it's hard to get out of that. I don't know if that was a risk that you were worried about.
Well, there is like there's a phase called like integration. It's kind of like once you understand these things, you've unplugged. So even if you just take 5 days and you are off the grid where you don't have phone access, internet access, all of that, there's so much information that you have not taken in.
Right, because
Like
it's
you're sitting with
blocked.
yourself, right? You're self-conscious. Yeah, you're evaluating now your only voice. You don't hear all of this stuff. But then now you go back into society, and then there's the news and social media. It's like all of these things. Some people have a hard time integrating back into all of that. And I think that was a big part of even before the medicine. It's like for 30 days, you're not drinking, you're not smoking, you're
Ooh,
abstaining from the information you're taking in, you're eating
ooh,
clean. So it's like when you show up, you're already kind of
in your
like in
best
a
shape.
very pure version. Yeah. And so you get to see this stuff, without the influence of the outside world. And then people do struggle with now going back into it, where you're like one of the few who now have this perspective on the world, and everything else is still going. So
Yeah.
it is a little bit of a change. But I went with my best friend. He's been my boy since high school. Me and him went, and we had similar kind of experiences. So after each night, like we would go play chess and talk about like our visions, which was that helped for sure.
Last question before I get into football. You know, I've always admired your endurance for the stuff you've done off the field, you know, and getting into that space. You know, I was always in the space, but not exactly in the space. And you providing a vehicle with Players Coalition and doing all that stuff, it was like I was right place, right time to be with you and be able to chip in my 2 cents and that sort of thing. But I'm a guest in the space, you know, like you can be an advocate, you can be an ally, whatever it is. But I know that like I'm I'm staying in the space, but this is like I'm a supporting piece of the puzzle, and like you being a black man, dealing with everything you deal with, being a leader, being ambitious in the space, like it's a different burden for you. And I know that journey's continued after football. I'm kind of wondering because it was a crazy fucking 3 4 years, you know, like
Yeah,
it
yeah,
was that space on steroids and you were in the forefront and there was messy stuff, and one of the things that was toughest for me was like getting in the space and seeing that like not everybody agrees, like, you know, and
yeah,
everybody wants the same thing in the space, but everybody wants to get there a different way, and
yeah,
people want to wear different hats. And I just thought you
yeah,
took a lot of shit and you were doing all the right things. I wonder if your endurance ever wore out.
yeah. Like, I outlined all of those things, right? Because you were close to it. You saw the behind the scenes of how hard it was to like organize players around that time.
Yeah.
And that was surprising for me. I assumed, when you raise your fist during the national anthem or you align yourself with people who are taking a knee during the national anthem, we know that there's going to be pushback and backlash to that, right? We weren't surprised. What I was surprised at was the internal kind of fighting and how hard it was to really get everyone on the same page. And you realize that even though we're on the same team, we have different motivations, we all want different things. And what's ironic is you and I both know what it's like to be on the team like that, where not everybody's here for the same reasons and what that looks
Hmm.
like. I think one of the things that helped me during that time was like Anquan Bolden. I talk about him. I hit him
Yeah.
up the other day, just like, bro, now that I'm reflecting on these moments, like I was catching a lot of those arrows, but he was a guy who was never cared about who got credit, who said what they were calling him. He's like, man, I'm here to get this done. He had his cousin, that was a real life story for him, somebody who died at the hands of an off-duty police officer unjustly, and he left the game of football to go do this work full time. And so standing next to like his poise, even though a lot of people didn't see it because he was no longer, at the podium, he wasn't doing the media because he wasn't in the league anymore. You know, his ability to stay focused on the things that mattered and the goal that we were trying to get and not about what people are saying was helpful for me, because there was times where I'm getting caught up in it too. I'm like, yo, are they calling me a sellout? Like, I got to respond. I got to say something back. I can't allow this to be, what they say about me to be, true, or that to be the perception. And it's like, bro, no, just stand on the work. Like in due time, all of that chatter will stop and your work will speak for itself. And that was helpful, because here we are, and the amount of work that has been done over those 7 years, I think is bigger than anything I could have even imagined. It's almost like we look back at those moments now, and it's almost foolish that we were even worried about what
Right.
people were saying and the media and all those things, when we were on the cusp of creating an organization that would empower 12 different sports leagues of professional athletes to get involved, not only just in their communities, but politically in their communities. That's something that's never been done before. And that was at that moment, those were the things that we were shouldering.
And it's probably hard for you. I know at times it's been hard for me, like just in my involvement with you. I mean, the backstory for people who don't know is everything that was going on in Charlottesville was affecting me, but in a way that, you know, like it's easy for me to say I'm affected, but you know, like after this passes, I'm gonna go back to being a white guy in America, and it's gonna, you know. But like, I remember being in training camp, being fucking mad, just sitting there watching the news at night, that sort of thing. Everything going on in my hometown. Came into work. I don't think we were that tight yet, and you know, I just saw you over at the breakfast table, and I'm like, yo, would you mind? Like, I don't want to
Right.
fuck your deal up.
Right.
I was like, hey, Malk, can I put my hand on your shoulder? Because I didn't want to upstage you or make it about me, but you do want people like me in the fight, you know. But I had to enter it the right way, and I just remember that conversation thinking, you know, like I just want to support Malk because I admired the way you went about your work, even if I didn't know you that well.
Right.
And you know, fast forward 6 7 years down the line, we're tight. I've been able to tag along for some great work that you've done, and you know, I've gotten a front row seat at you like having to take these arrows and be called a radical, you know, by people that
Right.
don't like you, but by the people you know that are supposed to be with you. You know, people are throwing the word sellout and that sort of thing around. So it's got to be hard because I know after football, I've met a lot of people who think they know who I am because I put my hand on your shoulder, you
Mm.
know, and some of them have this whole idea of who I am, how unreasonable I am. I hate America. I hate, you know, all this stuff. And really, what I'm doing is supporting a very valid mission for equality in America. You know,
Yeah.
I want you and people that look like you and come from different communities than me and that sort of thing to enjoy America as much as I have,
Yeah.
you know. And so I've always struggled with the after football of people looking at me and having these preconceived notions. I know it's probably even harder for you because you're the guy with
Yeah.
your fist up.
No, but I think the one thing about your narrative that I think, you know, was interesting to me, or I always appreciated, and I think you can talk more about it, and it would probably make sense to people, is that like you just putting your arm around me wasn't the first, that wasn't the entry point, right? You
No.
asked questions at first, like, hey, I want to understand what's going on,
Yeah.
and without taking like you're not feeling like you personally were responsible for it, or there was an attack, you know, on you.
I'm not taking
You
it
genuinely
personal.
listen, right? You genuinely listen to, all right, what is happening in the communities, and when you listen, you even like you heard stories, and you're like, that doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
and it was like that was really why you kept showing up, or at least that's what it seemed like, is because you actually took the time to like, all right, listen to what these issues are, how does this actually function. And even for me, I had to realize like, yeah, if I want an ally, then I have to allow some space for people to learn what is going on
Yeah.
and figure out how they play a role in it, right, without taking it over, without becoming now guilty or anything like that. You did exactly what I think we all would want. It's just somebody to, one, listen, and then two, put their arm around us. You don't have to go. You don't have to be front line. You
Yeah.
don't
I'm
have
with
to
you.
take it over. Right. I'm with you. I
I'm
support it. I
thinking
see
about you.
what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. That was
Yeah.
important. That
And
meant a lot to me.
if you throw me the alley oops, I'll make a play for you. But it was always you
Yeah.
were going to be the point guard,
Right.
and Q was going to be the point guard, and you know, for a
Mm-hmm.
while, Cap, Eric, those guys, you know, when we were working together, I can remember
Mm-hmm.
these calls were going on way before there was anything that
In the
people knew about.
organization,
I
really.
mean,
Yeah.
you and I talked, I think, for the first time on a conference call when I was in New England.
Yeah.
And, you know,
Yeah.
so the roots of guys trying to get together and then the exhaustion that followed of like, hey, you know, everybody's trying to get on the same page, do the same work, but it's not working out, you know, as a group. I felt for you. So I know it's not easy and, you know, just wanted to, because this is a football show, but Malk's done a lot more than football, and I've been there to see some of it. I hate buying tickets. I've been playing my whole life, never had to worry about buying tickets. The ticket part is stressful. The game's stressful. The ticket part's really stressful. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. And with the Game Time app, it's easy to find and buy tickets for every kind of event in your area. If I'm trying to see the monster trucks for my kids or Willie Nelson for me and my kids, I can find it all in the Game Time app. Game Time's the place for last-minute ticket deals. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has the deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The game time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code GREENLIGHT for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code GREENLIGHT for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Talking about football, going back to Philly, man. You know, I texted you the other day. I was like, can a secondary grow up over the course of a season? Because, you know, you look in that secondary, there's a lot of guys down. You know, they played Bradbury inside a bunch. That's a whole different deal. You played nickel. You know, it's like with the emphasis on having to have three corners in the NFL, the whole thing, that's changed over time. I don't know if you noticed when that's changed, like over the course of your career, when nickel became a really important position or what went into it. But on top of that, can a secondary grow up? Can you fill that void with somebody outside? And is it a bad thing to put your best corner inside? Like Bradbury's in there a bunch right now. It's what they got to do. But what do you think about the Eagles situation?
Man, I personally, and maybe it's selfish because it was my favorite position to play.
Yeah.
And where I thought I was the best, but I felt like the nickel is actually like one of the more valuable pieces that you can have because he basically plays three different positions. He's playing linebacker, so he has to understand run fits. He's playing corner, except he doesn't have the sideline as help.
Yeah.
You know, so you've got to understand coverage and where your help is and how to take away leverage. That guy's also making calls. He's got a blitz. So this player's got to be a cerebral player. So usually you'll lean to the veteran guy who can understand that, have that bandwidth. But it's like you need talent to play in there. It's hard to cover those shiftier route trees that have got more space, they're closer to the quarterback. So you really got to understand coverages. You know, I like veterans playing the position or a rookie who that's his only role and he can fit there. You know, but it helps when you have two corners. You got Bradbury and Slay on the outside. That helps your secondary so much. So now you've got Blankenship in the post who's developing well. And then so you're just looking at your down safety and your nickel. Whoever they are, you don't have to be the most talented, but they've got to understand coverage and help. Because they don't have to stop everything. They're the strong safety and the nickel are going to be closest to the linebackers, closest to the run fits. They just got to understand, you know, how to win that. You can set them up for success with coverages. But that's going to leave Slay and Bradbury to be one-on-one. They're going to have to, you know, win those matchups in order to really provide that help on the outside. But, I mean, when you look at our Super Bowl team, it was built off the D-line. And then some really, like, we had a bunch of injuries. So it was me, Nigel playing, you know, manipulating the defense and coverage. And then Darby and Jalen Mills holding up on the outside. There wasn't, you know, they weren't the lockdown corners out there, but they could play. But our scheme lent to it, right? They knew their role, and that's all you had to do. And I think that's really, for me, has always been the easiest way to get away with like a lower level of talent is make the defense simple, make it easy to execute, and then they can do that versus anybody.
It's a dynamite segue. It's a dynamite segue into Jim Schwartz in a second in his defense. I want you to explain that. Yeah. But at what point in your career did nickel become a thing? Like, you know, a bigger thing? Do you remember like some moment where you're like, all of a sudden,
it was really good. It was when, and I talk about this, I'm go back to this book, but I talk about it in my book, the transition from being a corner to safety and then really finding out that nickel was my best spot, but I had to convince all of these coordinators to put me there. Mm-hmm. And really when I got to Philly was the first times where they were like allowing me to play that nickel position. I started having the best years of my career because I'm closer to the football and I can do all of these things, right? I can manipulate the run. I can cover receivers. I can cover tight ends, cover backs, play deep in the coverage. You've got so much more versatility when you've got a guy that can do all of those things, as opposed to if they put 12 personnel on the field, now you've got to go base, or they put 11, now you've got to change the nickel. When I was out there, you can play now nickel against anything.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So if you got a tight end who can, if you got a nickel who can hold up, cover a big tight end, hold up in the
Mhm.
run game. Like, yeah, you can be a lot more adaptive with your personnel. You
Right.
know, so and it's like the Rams. We just talked about this. The Rams played the Eagles, and you know that star position being so valuable. Jalen Ramsey. One of the things you took for granted was that you had a
Mhm.
Swiss Army knife who could fit in the run front. You know, they run cover
Yep.
3, they run cover 4. He can fill that backside A, all that stuff. And
Yep.
you know, they got Kobe Durant in there, who's younger, he's smaller. You know, it's a hard fucking job. You know, a lot of people look
Hard
at
one.
the
Yeah.
corners outside, they look at the D line, but the nickel, if you don't have it, or if you had somebody like Jalen Ramsey who's being asked to do a lot, like that's a real luxury. So, or yourself in
Yep.
Philly. And so, I guess my question to you would be for people getting familiar with Jim Schwartz, if they missed the Super Bowl run, what does he do? You know, like I always thought of him as a real simple cat. You know,
Mhm.
it was about the players and it was about some simple concepts and mixing in some blitzes and pressures at the right times, but he was going to let the rushers eat. What did
Yeah.
you like? If somebody's like, "Hey, Malk, explain Jim Schwartz," how do you do that?
Yeah. I would say Jim Schwartz he's an adaptive coach, right? So this his first year, he's gonna have his scheme. I think when he first got to Philly, he was more of a split safety kind of guy. Ran combo coverages, and he's got the wide nine where he's gonna lead with the D line. The D line will get the right of way for everything. He's gonna try to get pressure with four, hold up in coverage with combo coverages and split safety, defense, and that was kind of it. But he changed once we weren't built for that,
Yeah,
and he started to look at Seattle a lot. And so did I. I really love like the Legion of Boom playing single high where everything now can look like split safety, but you really don't know if we're in single high, if the safety's inserting weak, if he's inserting strong, if he's inserting in the middle. Is it really quarters? But it's all kind of the same principles. And it's very simple. What that allowed guys to do was, this left corner has the same job every time. The right corner has the same job every time. The nickel, same job every time. And then the only three players that really have adjustments were like the free safety, strong safety, and linebacker. And that allowed me to say, so that's my role. Okay, I look at the formation. Where's the offense trying to attack us? Right. So
yeah,
if it's three receivers to one side, I know they're trying to get a receiver on the mic. I can switch with the mic.
yeah,
And it's very simple switch. Or they put a back that they've got that they want to create a one-on-one on the backside. Well, okay, me and the mic will switch.
yeah,
And it's just like there's nothing you can do to put us in a bad position besides throw to the corner who already knows which routes you're going to try to hit him with and vice versa. That made us play so much faster, even if we didn't have a guy who could lock you down all day. We at least knew what we were doing. We knew the weaknesses of what we were doing and how you had to attack us. And so we just meet you there. And I think that was to me like one of the best things you can do as a coach is create a defense that is tailored to the players in it and then make it simple so they don't even have to think of the scheme. They're only thinking about the offense and what's coming.
You talk about Jim. We talk about that Eagles run. Who's a guy that you don't think got enough credit for the effect that they had on that defense or that team?
Yeah. Patrick Robinson,
That's the first
I
off the
think the
top of
guy.
my head.
Yeah, because he was he was on the street as a free agent,
Yeah,
and I remember him hitting me up like, "Hey, I'm just looking to get on a team and get a good year of football under my belt." And I had been with him in New Orleans,
yeah,
and so I'm like, he knew kind of the room that I had. He's like, he's a guy that plays really well when he's around a group of people that are focused.
yeah.
Man, but I think he was rated like in the top two corners that like passer rating that whole
He was
year.
great.
Yeah, played phenomenal. And we talk about guys that you don't have to worry about. He's blitzing. He's that nickel position,
Yeah,
right? Blitzing, covering guys. Got us through a bunch of injuries, and then had that big pick six in the NFC Championship.
yeah.
Like we don't have. I don't think we're as good as we are if we didn't have Patrick that year.
No, he was awesome, man. And you know, like you talk about Patrick Robinson and bringing him LG. I can remember LG. It's so funny everything that came together
Yeah.
that year. But like I can remember calling Torrey, calling LG. You know, Torrey was
Mm-hmm.
already on his way down, but I was like, let's do this. And then LG, I'm like, bro, this is fucking awesome. I've been talking to these guys.
Bro.
So just like the free agency hits that we had with veterans, and the way that the
Hmm.
veterans were actually recruiting other veterans to come
Yeah,
play in
because we
Philly.
saw it. We're like, yo, hey, we got a lot of young talent here. We just need a couple
Yeah,
like vets to keep them all
yeah,
focused, and we'll be good.
yeah. What was your favorite regular season win in that run? Because everybody talks about the Super Bowl, but there were some moments where they're kind of like, and you've been on a Super Bowl team, I've been on a Super Bowl team, but me, it was New England. It's hard to draw any comparison to anywhere else. Like,
Yeah.
was there a moment where you're like, yeah, we're pretty good?
Um, I think there were a few games where we knew it. I think by the time we got to the Bears team the game and we were doing an electric slide on the sideline, it's like we knew we were
Yeah, we
good,
blew them
right?
out.
But we had to reset that when we lost Carson. And
Yeah.
I'm like, that stretch was probably my favorite because it was like, all right, now we get to really see what y'all are made of.
Mm-hmm.
You lose your, potential MVP quarterback, and then now you're an underdog in each of these games. So I think my favorite regular season game that year was the game against the Raiders
Yeah, that mine
because we
too.
had to clinch the first
Yeah,
round at home. We had to clinch the number one seed that day, and they came to
it
play
was cold. They
that
came
defensive
to
battle.
play.
Yeah,
It was physical. They had Marshawn. And the week
Marshawn
before,
Lynch.
it's hard to remember this, but like we played New York, and I felt like we were so as a defense, and we said this. You and I were like, yo, we got to worry about us. Like everybody's worried about
Yep.
the quarterback, and the Giants hung like 20 something on us, and we escaped with a win.
Yeah.
And the next
Yep.
week, it was like we dialed it in and worried about us, and that's where we realized our potential as a team. It's like we don't always have to be scoring 30 points. Let's
Right.
win this thing on defense. Yeah. So if I was to ask you, best uniform you ever wore, I'm talking about the looks here because you never got to wear the Kelly
Yeah.
greens, but like mid
Yeah, I know. I never got to do the Kelly Green,
midnight
man.
green, scarlet and gray. Is that how y'all say it down there? And then uh,
Yeah, the Scarlet Gray.
scarlet and gray, or then the New Orleans uniform. What's the best uniform
Yeah,
you've worn in your career?
my favorite uniform of all time is when we played. I was with the Saints and we went to Philly. We had the white on
Yeah,
whites, white sleeve, white socks, white cleats, gold helmet, and
that's
then a
sweet.
tinted visor. I'm like, yeah, okay. It was clean. That's why I didn't get a chance to wear the Kelly Green. That would have probably been my
That'd
best.
have been number
I,
one.
I'm jealous that the Eagles get to pull them out this year. Uh, I got to get me
Bro, you got
one.
to see the
I got to hit
Broncos. You
Dom.
got to see the Broncos get-ups from yesterday. I don't know if you saw any of that game, but
I didn't see the
they
Broncos.
all orange with white helmets. They look fucking incredible. So yeah, I think
Mm.
the Kelly Greens would have been number one. Okay, bouncing around a little bit. Chiefs, Spags, defense. You've played for Spags before. I played for Spags before. Way different than Jim Schwartz in that
Yeah,
like Spags is going to make it a little more complicated, and it
yeah,
shows when he plays these young quarterbacks and he heats them up.
yeah,
I kind of wonder for you what makes a Spags defense go because it's been variable. Like he's had the historically bad defense.
yeah.
That's happened. With us, we weren't great, but we didn't have great personnel in St. Louis. And then he's
Yeah.
also been a championship, defensive coach in Kansas City as well,
Twice,
and in New
right?
York.
Yeah,
So what
yeah,
makes his defense go?
yeah. It starts with the D line, and I talk about it, in my book a lot. And he probably got the short end of the stick in my book as a coach because I was part of the historically, bad
That
defense. We
year,
were the
dude.
worst defense in the
We
history
were
of the
all like in
game.
St. Louis. We were like, see,
See, it's
it's
not,
not me.
it's not us. Yeah, but nah, it was tough because we were a blitzing team.
Yeah,
We were built for man pressure coming from Greg Williams, and we went to Spagnola, and he's a zone pressure team
fire
that's
zones.
all
Yeah,
about the front four. So if you can't get his defense gets pressure with the front four, and then it's all zone pressures kind of behind it. So if he's unable to get to the quarterback, suddenly there are holes, in the secondary. There's, guys that are the flats that are open, but it's hard to find them if your quarterback's under duress. And so it's really big for him to have some pure pass rushers that can get to the quarterback, in a few steps without having to be too elaborate. But I think he has adjusted too over the years to just what his team does a little bit more. I mean, I played for Spags back in 2012.
Yeah.
He's grown a lot,
Yeah.
as a coordinator, and I think it's worked at different spots. Like you said, he's been a Super Bowl champion defensive coordinator now twice. Um, so I think for me is if I'm looking at Spags' defense, I'm first have to handle the front, and then I'm looking at the zone pressures, what zone pressures he likes the most, and I'm gonna look to exploit those. But you've got to be able to take care of that rush if you want to.
Yeah, and this year without Chris Jones, like the first game, I was really
Yeah.
worried about this defense without Chris Jones. Like that's why he makes such a big difference is,
Yep.
you need rushers. And I got no problem with Karlaftis and some of the other guys they've had and Dana, and they played well, but like that's the straw that stirs the drink in a Spags defense. And I
Yep.
wonder if you could remember 2 or 3 Spags calls. Do you remember any of the names of the calls? And I could tell you if I actually remember what the fuck a D lineman did. I remember there was one called Spartan.
There was Spartan.
Spartan
there was
is I got across the guard's face, so I remember that.
Sparrow.
Sparrow, that was Edges.
That was the
Yes, I remember.
Damn, what was the other Spags called?
See, it's been
Dang.
12, 13 years. We've only learned 3 defenses since, but I can tell you what Sparrow and Spartan are.
Right,
It's
Sparrow.
pretty-
I don't even know why I like.
Yeah, it's funny. You barely remember some of this shit, but I'm not going to hold you to that. I'm pretty sure if Spags came on the show, we'd be able to at least ace the test. But another guy you play for, Sean Payton. Obviously, tough time to talk about Sean Payton. I'm a big fan of Sean Payton. He's been on the show, and it's so funny, Malk. When he came on like 2 off seasons ago, we thought we'd have him for like 45 minutes, and he was like, "No, I'm just driving through Louisiana." He stayed on the phone for 2 hours. He just wouldn't stop talking, and like that's the type of guy you can tell he is. He just loves to talk about football. He'll go forever. And when the whole Hackett thing went down, I almost felt like he just forgot that he was coaching again, and he was still being an analyst. But like, what do you see when you watch Denver struggling? I know you haven't watched all the games, but do you think Sean can pull them out of this? Like, what makes him great? Because we've only seen him really in New Orleans, and now he's got to take that mantra somewhere else.
Yeah, I think what we've seen him do, right, is like in New Orleans, he started in 2006.
Yeah.
And he built that program, from the ground up and had success pretty early. Got Drew Brees, and he created a culture that, like, no matter who came and went, that culture was there. And it was, there's only a few franchises in the league that have a culture like that is as long standing as his was. And now he finds himself, at a new juncture, but it's 2023. Right, it's a different time. The Bill Parcells methods don't always work, and so I think there's a balance that has to happen of him embracing this team that he has in this year, but he's got to also instill his new culture. But also that team has got to embrace that you're not going back to Kansas. This is a new sheriff in town, and Sean likes things his way. And when you're not winning, he's not going to back off of his stance. It's kind of a get down and lay down type of situation. So I think that's what I want to see. Are they having fun? Because that's what Sean Payton's teams to be. They're competitive. They play hard. They usually have fun and enjoy the game.
Yeah.
And right now you don't really see that.
Yeah, who's got bigger balls, him or Doug? You've been a part of the onside kick to open the second half, and Doug with the Philly special. I know if you boiled it down to those 2 decisions, it'd probably be Sean. But in general, having that aggressive.
If you went to those 2, I think Doug's a little bit more aggressive, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like he goes for it on 4th down routinely.
Yep.
Like that's just his deal. He don't care.
Yeah.
But I think that's the competitor in him that we took on that personality.
That attitude.
And same in New Orleans. He came in the locker room that in that Super Bowl, like, hey, we running the ambush, and like, oh, we're all ready. Like, we've been preparing for that. So it's not like he's even shocking us.
Yeah.
You take on the personality of your head coach, and I think that's when you look at Denver right now, you don't see that. You see Sean Payton and you see the Denver Broncos. And we're waiting to see like that marriage of kind of ideology.
Which culture is going to win out, the culture of losing or the culture of Sean Payton? So, and by the way, I didn't talk about this earlier. You mentioned Super Bowls. Tom Brady wrote your foreword for your book. And that to me is out of left field a little bit because, you were a thorn in his side, man. Like, like I'll always
Yeah.
remember just because Sammy B's my guy, and when he was playing Philly, I keep one eye on some of those games, and I was like, yeah, I wonder if they're gonna go beat the Patriots this afternoon. Y'all went and beat the Patriots. You had a pick six. I can remember in the
Hmm.
Super Bowl you barking at him and be like, Malcolm, please shut the fuck up. Can you please like walk over here? Like we do not need to piss Tom Brady off, but you just didn't care.
Yeah.
How did that relationship go? Like, and is there a relationship? How did you go about getting him to write that forward?
Yeah, so like there's only the relationship from a competitor standpoint
Yeah,
and just being around the league, being a peer. But as we were thinking about the title of the book, I'm like, okay, who are the type of people that should write your foreword? And they're like, well, people who know you, who but also have that validate kind of some of the things you're saying in the book. And I'm saying, well, if the title is a legendary defender, then who better to kind of talk on that than my favorite opponent?
yeah,
And I'm like, Tom is one of those guys who I've had. When he retired, I didn't even realize how significant of like a character he was in my game.
yeah.
Because I'm like, well, if he's not playing, like, who do I go against? Like,
Mm-hmm.
where's
Yeah,
my motivation?
yeah,
So, but I just remember just a lot of the things I've even learned from Tom as a competitor. Those joint practices, and I'll never forget a ball he threw to Randy Moss. I'm playing, cover two. I'm on the
yeah. We can
backside
still
safety.
hear
We're
him.
doing a
He's a
2-minute
Philly fan.
drill. So I'm like, for me, even when Brady retired, I'm like, damn, who am I gonna go against? I'm looking around the NFC NFC South like, damn, he was really a big part of my motivation every
Yeah,
year. Um, but I'm like, all right, who's my favorite? If I'm gonna say legendary defender on the front of the book, then I need to who better to write that narrative or that story than Tom Brady, my favorite opponent.
yeah,
And I just got a lot of respect for him, like who he made me be as an opponent because I knew I was getting ready for Tom Brady, like constantly. A lot of those moments are in the book as well. So, it was one of those things that he was at least, I've been trolling him these last few years about the Super Bowl. At least he wasn't,
well,
in
you
his
got like
feelings and everything
seven.
like that.
Fuck, if you're in your feelings, dude,
Right.
that's a you
Like we
problem.
could have one.
Yeah. The other guy I want to ask you about is Dan Campbell. You were only there for a second, right? But I remember
Yeah.
texting you because I was like, immediately when they hired him, shocker, I was like, yes, I love this guy.
Yeah.
He's like my kind of guy, dude. And I think a lot of people looked at the cover of the book and they were like, oh, he's just this dumb jock. He's fucking got a big pickup truck and all this stuff, but he's a really sharp guy. And, like he's talking about biting kneecaps, but there's a lot of intentionality about the way he's going to build this program. He's going to hire coaches that played in the league, some of our guys,
Yeah.
he's a physical outfit. He coached under Sean Payton. He's smart, and he was a pretty good player. Like he had a long career, and you played
Hmm.
with him. So, like, were there any impressions of Dan Campbell as a teammate?
I played. He was the a coach. So
Oh,
I'm like, I
he was
got
a
to see
coach.
him.
You played for him,
He was
yeah,
the coach.
yeah,
Yeah, I played for him. So I'm watching like, oh, this guy's intense.
yeah,
Like so when he got the head job, you knew that okay, that's going to be a physical team. He brought Aaron Glenn with him, like you said, a bunch of other
yeah,
coaches who were former players. So they're going to be able to relate to especially a young group of players and get them to play probably more mature than they actually are.
yeah,
And we see that they're a physical bunch. They're gritty. That's all coming from the head coach. You're going to embody who that person is. So when he's talking about biting kneecaps and all those things, it sounds funny to the outside world, but internally you're like that.
yeah.
That means you're dealing with 53 guys that'll bite your kneecaps off.
Yeah, exactly. And that's pretty
Yeah,
tame shit compared to some of the stuff I heard out of New Orleans.
yeah, right.
And I
Greg
played for
Williams
Greg
days. Yeah,
too. Even when Greg wasn't doing that, people were like, "Whoa,
yeah,
you just the verbiage." But yeah, no, and
yeah.
that's when you say cut the head off the snake, I'm like, well, that's a metaphor.
It's a metaphor. Kill the head and the body will die.
Yeah,
Is
what
what
did Mother
what it used to
Ayahuasca
be.
say about Greg Williams?
I had to shed some of that conditioning. Yeah, he
um,
definitely had a brainwash.
Yeah,
Crazy.
I mean, so I'm a big Dan Campbell fan. My last question for you is Ohio State related. It's really a two-part question. Number one, why do you think it took so long to find a good quarterback from Ohio State, and C.J. Stroud? And then number two, do you hate Michigan, Atlanta, or the Cowboys more? And how would you order that?
All right, I'm gonna start with this second. It would go Cowboys because it's closer to the Michigan is a little further removed.
Yeah, and you always beat them.
Um, yeah, and I've always beat them, so it's never been a
Yeah.
problem. So I would say Cowboys, Michigan, and then the Falcons.
8 week down there seems
I actually
serious.
have a line in my book, like a quote. I'm talking about how I would never play for Jerry Jones. I would retire before I played for the
Good.
Cowboys. So I'm like, let that stick between
Yeah.
the pages forever.
Uh-huh.
Um, as far as a quarterback, look, man, I can't. They gave Troy Smith. That was my
I
favorite
love Troy
Ohio State
Smith.
quarterback of all
I
time,
love
man.
Troy
He got
Smith.
a bad rap in the league, man.
He
He
was
just
pretty
played
good.
for, yeah, Singletary. Had a little rough go there, the head coach, and kind of buried his career. But I thought he was pretty good.
I did
But
too.
since then, I think haven't had many like pro style quarterbacks to come out of Ohio State, and I think when you talk about transitioning to the league, if you are not able to add that like pocket presence and throwing along with the zone read
Yeah.
and the quarterback runs, it's just tough. Like it's tough to do unless they build the entire offense around you, like we've seen with Baltimore or Philly. I think we've had those type of quarterbacks until Stroud is really playing well,
Yeah.
and we see him developing. But it's that collegiate game doesn't always translate to the league.
Yeah. No, I mean, especially at quarterback, it's really hard to call. And then, the context around you matters no matter what draft pick you are. I always feel bad for
Right.
guys because I was there as being a high pick on a bad team. It's like, well, it's easy in a lot of ways because you're making money, you're set, you're going to get more opportunities, but it's a shit show, there, and the
Yeah.
expectations are high. And I think Bobby Slowick's done a nice job in Houston with enough pro
Yeah.
style elements to, and this guy has done a great job of adjusting. Tell the people what you did this weekend. Was it the Hall of Fame at Ohio State, or what happened there?
Yeah, so I just got inducted to the Ohio State's Athletic Hall of Fame.
Awesome.
That was cool. So myself and it's about 13 inductees. Nick Mango was also one of them. So that was cool.
He
Got
doesn't
to
talk
go through a
much.
banquet. No, he doesn't talk much at all. Doesn't talk much
I
at
was
all.
on a panel
He
with
actually,
him, and I'm like, does he hate me? He's just probably like people feel when they first meet you. The two of you guys
exactly
having a
right.
conversation.
That's very, very, very few words in that
Yeah,
conversation.
exactly.
But it was awesome. They played Maryland for homecoming, so they brought us on the field at halftime,
Yeah.
recognized us, all those things. So it was definitely an honor. My parents got to come in and see all of it.
Oh,
It was cool.
congrats, man. That's awesome. Well deserved. We got to see James Laurinaitis, our guy. One
Yeah,
last time, the book is What Winners Won't Tell You, Lessons from a Legendary Defender. Legendary teammate, legendary off the field, legendary on the field, and a great guest. I appreciate you taking all this time, bro, and it's good to see you.
Good to
Congrats
see you
on
as
the
well,
book,
bro.
dude. Congrats. Big
Thank you.
congrats. I know an author. So appreciate you,
You
big
do.
dog.